A chilling encounter in the South Atlantic would soon ignite one of the most desperate and dramatic naval battles of World War II, a clash that would forever etch its name into history. It was December 2, 1939, aboard a British cargo steamer off the west coast of South Africa. Have you heard about the Germans? Yes. They sank another ship south of us last week. What? We're being fired upon from starboard. We're under attack. Tell the captain. What the hell was that? On the bridge, Captain William Stubbs was already on high alert. His binoculars revealed a terrifying sight. A 16,000-ton German monster was pursuing them, a vessel the size of a heavy cruiser, armed with 28-centimeter guns typically found on battleships, a pocket battleship. Full speed ahead. Aye aye, sir. Send the distress signal. The small ship turned to flee, broadcasting every piece of information it could in its remaining minutes. A flashing light signal from the enemy blinked in Morse code. They're ordering us to stop transmitting. To hell with that. Keep sending. Make sure every ship in the region knows they're here. Aye aye, sir. Captain Stubbs continued to watch the enemy, growing larger on the horizon. The ship's massive 28-centimeter guns were aimed directly at him. He recognized the silhouette. It was the Admiral Graf Spee. It's the Spee. Get that into the transmission. Pocket battleship Graf Spee. Yes, sir. They continued to broadcast all the information they could, prolonging the encounter until the feared warship was directly upon them. Further resistance would be perilous. Stubbs had no choice but to surrender. Cut the power and stop the transmission. It's over. The Doric Star fell silent. On board the German warship, Captain Hans Wilhelm Langsdorff watched as his men boarded the small cargo vessel. They captured the crew, bringing them aboard the heavy cruiser before searching the ship and placing explosive charges. It had become a routine procedure, one Langsdorff was keen to see executed with professionalism. Good work. Back on the main deck, Captain Stubbs was singled out and escorted to the brig. Behind him, massive explosions ripped through the waves, followed by the cheers of German sailors. But as the freighter sank into the depths, thousands of kilometers away, a Royal Navy squadron heard its final radio transmissions. Sir, the Graf Spee has struck again. Commodore Henry Harwood pondered the new information. Call the officers. Under his command were the heavy cruiser Exeter and the light cruisers Ajax and Achilles. They were patrolling off the coast of South America, as far as possible from the scene of the action. The Graf Spee had been their target for months, but with this transmission, Harwood felt they could finally put an end to its rampage. There's a change of plan. The Graf Spee claimed another victim yesterday, around 1300 hours. I suspect South American shipping will be its next target. We must be ready. I agree, sir, but where? I have a feeling they'll move towards the Rio de la Plata. The Rio de la Plata. It's going to be tight there. The choke point for all cargo ships heading to the Argentinian and Uruguayan capitals. There will be plenty of targets. The 16,000-ton Graf Spee sailed towards its new destination, unaware it was heading directly into Harwood's trap. On the morning of December 15, 13 days after the loss of the Doric Star, Captain Frederick Secker Bell aboard the heavy cruiser Exeter oversaw the early morning activities. The squadron had been patrolling the estuary for days. Lookouts were on high alert, waiting for Harwood's prediction to come true. It had been a tense wait. Initial sightings suggested they were coming, but for days there had been no new information, until smoke confirmed at 320 degrees. Lookouts aft report the enemy. Sir, Harwood reports smoke at 320 degrees. Order to investigate. Response positive. Man battle stations. Load semi-armor piercing shells. Yes, sir. Man battle stations. The Exeter turned west and approached the mysterious vessel. Slowly, the masts came into view, then the superstructure, and finally, the mighty guns. It was clear. The Germans were here. It's them. Tell Harwood we have a pocket battleship. Message confirmed. A pocket battleship at 320 degrees. The Exeter reports the enemy in sight. After months of hunting and so many lost merchant ships, the showdown was finally here. Man battle stations. Course 30 degrees and full speed ahead. Tell the Exeter to engage the ship from the south. We'll encircle them from the east, as practiced. Order from the Ajax to the Exeter, attack the ship from the south, the rest of the force will execute the other flank, fire permission granted. But these shells were more than twice as heavy as their own. The Exeter was completely outmatched, but Bell relied on their strategic and numerical advantage. Full speed ahead. Maintain current course. Yes, sir. Captain, smoke ahead. It was a surprise, but he accepted the challenge. All right. Then we'll meet them head-on. The two ships continued to close the distance. The Graf Spee's course remained unchanged. Bell watched through his binoculars as two massive gun turrets aligned themselves with his ship. And then, open fire. The first shots of the Battle of the River Plate deluged the waves, shells splashing into the sea. The Exeter's gunnery officer, Lieutenant Commander Richard Jennings, recalled. The captain called me, not with the usual enemy in sight, bearing, etc., but with. There's the bloody sheer. There's the bloody sheer. Fire at her. The Exeter unleashed her guns with powerful volleys. Shells soared across the sky, but they too missed their target. On the Exeter, the situation grew frantic as the German warship found its range. Shells landed ever closer, showering the deck with deadly shrapnel. Yet the Exeter also adjusted her range. She fired her 203mm batteries, striking the Graf Spee's hull, but the armor remained unbreached. Deep within the German warship, Captain Stubbs of the Doric Star sat alone and silent in his cell. The impact of the shells echoed through the hull, thrumming in his ears. The German salvo landed just barely off target. The massive shells detonated mere meters away with terrifying force. The concussion and shrapnel were so intense that the Exeter's radio failed. Sir, we've lost contact with Harwood. It's too late to turn back. Carry on. Their shells struck the Graf Spee's deck, destroying anti-aircraft guns, but they couldn't stop the enemy Goliath. Bell watched the enemy through his binoculars. He saw the huge guns fire, their shells soaring into the air, seeming to hang for endless seconds. Bell had no time to react, not that it would have mattered, he felt it. This was a direct hit. The brutal impact destroyed a turret, sending shrapnel flying towards the bridge. The fragments effortlessly pierced the bridge's thin walls, with tragic consequences. Bell found himself dazed on the deck, surrounded by the fallen. By incredible luck, he remained largely uninjured. There was no time to mourn. With determination in his eyes, Bell returned to his post, only to find his communication systems destroyed. At that moment, medics rushed in, but there was no time. He hurried past them, leaving the bridge and making his way to the aft command station. Do you have communication here? No, sir, we've lost it. He looked around and called out to the first sailor he saw. You, come here. I have no communication. Tell the men in the port torpedo department to be ready to fire when the enemy comes into sight, and tell the helmsman to steer 25 degrees to starboard. The unknown sailor saluted and ran off. Bell then rushed to someone else. On his way back to the bridge, Bell recruited more sailors, re-establishing communication throughout the ship. You, ask the damage control officer for updates. You. Tell the magazines I have no communication. For any emergency they have, send a runner to me and find someone to tell the same to the aft turrets. Within minutes, a team of runners formed. From this moment on, this would be Bell's only way to control the ship. But somehow, it worked. The ship began to turn to starboard, and the torpedoes were ready to fire. And they flew into the sea. The 4 remaining guns fired with deafening fury across the waves, while the torpedoes silently sped towards their target. Despite the runners' best efforts, they were never fast enough for precise targeting, and the torpedoes missed their mark entirely. But Bell refused to give up. "Keep firing." The remaining 2 turrets continued to fire, spreading death and destruction over the exposed elements of the Graf Spee, but inflicting little internal damage. Shot after shot struck the heavy armor of the German warship with little effect, deflecting or stopping mid-path. Finally, they had a stroke of luck. A projectile at last penetrated the armor, smashing directly through the lower decks and exploding deep inside, destroying the fuel purification plant. There were no fires or floods, but with a single blow, the ship was doomed. Unable to purify its massive diesel tanks, its usable fuel was reduced from days to hours, not enough to return to Europe. But it did not diminish its fighting power. Another salvo struck the heavily damaged cruiser. One shot hit the turret, the other pierced the hull. The second shot exploded inside, igniting an ammunition store. The brave sailors in the station rushed to their fire extinguishers, dousing the flames before a catastrophic fire and explosion could be triggered. The hit disabled gunnery officer Richard Jennings' last gun. Damn it! He decided to abandon his position as director of the control tower and ran through the chaos to reach the Exeter's last functioning main gun. To the surprise of the turret crew, Jennings climbed to the top of the turret and began shouting instructions. "Turn left. Aim for their turrets." Jennings stared at the massive enemy warship in the distance as his turret aimed beneath him. "Fire." Jennings was engulfed by gas and heat from the huge cannons, but he held firm. "Right up. 100 meters. Fire." Meanwhile, Commodore Harwood, aboard the 2 light cruisers, grew impatient with the lack of results. All day they had executed the other flank, aiming to overwhelm the Graf Spee with a crossfire. But without communication with the Exeter, they couldn't even ascertain if their targeting was accurate. And now, he clearly saw the Exeter smoking and listing, while the Graf Spee remained seemingly unharmed. With a sinking feeling, he recognized the truth: they had achieved nothing. Course 285. Close the distance. Full speed. The ships broke formation and charged to the Exeter's rescue. Aboard the Graf Spee, Langsdorff spotted the approaching British. "It's a torpedo attack. Turn west and deploy the smoke screen." But the Exeter wasn't finished yet. Course 270, and her last turret was commanded by a madman riding on top. Fire. Still, they continued to chase the Graf Spee, firing with what little they had, scoring hits on her superstructure. The Graf Spee turned all her guns on them and opened fire. The massive salvo narrowly missed, a huge plume of water erupting directly in front of Jennings' face. Yet he remained unshaken. "You have the range. Fire." He called for more, but the gun wouldn't move. "What's wrong?" "We have no power. It can't traverse." Water had seeped through the damaged hull, short-circuiting the turret systems. "Damn it. We've lost the Y turret, report that to the captain." "Sir, the Y turret is out of action." Captain Bell was furious, his eyes blazing with fire. "I'll ram the bastard. It will be our end. But he'll sink too. Issue ramming orders. Hard to starboard. Starboard." The Exeter, ablaze and out of options, turned to ram the enemy. But just then, a salvo of shells struck near the Graf Spee. The light cruisers Ajax and Achilles had broken through the smoke screen and opened fire with significantly improved accuracy. "Harwood is on them. They've finally got him. Damn, they've found the range." Captain Langsdorff pushed the Exeter from his thoughts as the new adversaries bombarded the Graf Spee's upper deck with salvo after salvo. With increasing damage and casualties, Captain Langsdorff ordered a retreat. Cease fire and full speed ahead. Course for Montevideo. The Ajax and Achilles shelled the ship for another hour as the Graf Spee desperately sailed into neutral waters. But they were too far away, and Harwood was determined not to let the ship escape. "What's our ammunition status?" 20% remaining, sir." Harwood was shocked. It was far less than he had expected. If he continued, he might have too little ammunition to defend himself should they encounter another battle. "Cease fire. Withdraw and shadow them." They pursued the Graf Spee to the neutral port of Montevideo, Uruguay. There, the prisoners from the Doric Star were released according to international regulations. But for the Graf Spee, her troubles were far from over. Upon her arrival in Montevideo, deception and politics soon followed. The British began broadcasting easily intercepted signals, suggesting that reinforcements were arriving. She had no fuel reserves to return home, no way to repair the fuel plant, and strict orders not to allow the ship to be interned in Uruguay. There was only one obvious option, and that was to escape to Argentina, but he believed an augmented British fleet would stand in his way. "I believe we have no other choice. Place the explosive charges." On December 17, the ship, with only Langsdorff and 40 other men on board, left Uruguayan waters. It was a devastating blow for Langsdorff. The High Command held him entirely responsible for the demise of the armored ship Admiral Graf Spee. Langsdorff wrote, "I alone bear the responsibility for the scuttling of the armored ship Admiral Graf Spee. I am prepared to pay with my life for any possible impairment of the flag's honor." 3 days later, in a hotel room in Buenos Aires, he kept his word and took his own life with his weapon. The mighty ship burned for 2 days in the shallow waters. Despite the lack of a decisive victory, the battle was nevertheless considered a great success for the Royal Navy. Commodore Henry Harwood was promoted to Rear Admiral and knighted for his leadership. Captain Frederick Secker Bell received no naval awards for his actions, yet he and much of the Exeter's crew were welcomed as heroes by the residents of the city of Exeter. Gunnery Officer Richard Jennings, on the other hand, was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for his actions and later took command of his own ships. All 3 men survived the war.